Our guest today is a writer, storyteller, and voice that moves across continents. Born in Miami, raised in Boston, and now calling Lisbon home, it's exactly that intersection of roots, cultures, and flavors that shapes everything she writes. We are talking about Margo Gabriel, award winning journalist, author of the cookbook The Expat Kitchen, and someone whose words have appeared in the New York Times, the BBC, HuffPost, and Refinery 29. Here, in Portugal, she made her mark as a food columnist for the Time Out Lisboa and has collaborated with outlets like Público and Mensagem de Lisboa. But beyond the bylines, what drew us to her is the way she tells stories, always at the crossroads of culture, food, and memory. With Asian American roots and a life built across multiple cities and countries, Margot understands firsthand what it means to live between worlds. And that's exactly the conversation we are diving into with her today, here on Mukidi.
So, now I'm seeing the docs that we basically forgot the first most important question, right? The basic one.
Who who are you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Who are you? How you define
Uh,
yourself?
of course. Great question. I'm Margo Gabriel. I'm a Haitian American journalist and culinary creative from Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been based here in Lisbon for the last 5 years. And my pronouns are her, her, she, and hers.
Okay. And when did you first realize that cooking could be also an ancestral act?
I would say probably as a kid, uh, my mom and my older sister taught me how to cook, and so it's a familiar tradition within the Haitian culture. Both my parents are from the island of Haiti, and food, community, family are super important pillars within our communities. And so it was really natural that all of my siblings learned how to cook. Uh, I was a bit reluctant at first, but as I got older and moved away from home, cooking and like preserving my culture, speaking my language, listening to music from my culture really helped me to feel closer, even though I was physically so far away from my immediate family. So I'd say like the culinary traditions that we hold close to us within the Haitian diaspora and largely in the African diaspora really can help us to preserve our culture. Even if we don't speak the language, it ties us to this broader community. And I found that cooking was one of the most immediate ways for me to feel close to my family and also connect with others from the African diaspora when I landed here 5 years ago.
Do you have family memories tied to food?
I mean,
I would
yes,
say,
right?
yeah, a bunch of them, yeah. Maybe like half of the sort of food memories that I have growing up are related to like family dinners and celebrating like weddings and big anniversaries and stuff like this. And so it it was always sort of a natural thing for me to host and have people over. And that's essentially what I did when I landed here. Some of the first like small dinners that I had were with my newfound friends here. And being a food and wine writer really also lends itself to being in community with people who maybe don't have the same life experiences that I've had. Um, and I found it really interesting, like meeting the my Angolan friends, my Cape Verdean friends, my friends from Sao Tome or from Guinea-Bissau, um, and in other parts of the Lusophone speaking world, like I was able to find a through line um, based off of some of the dishes. So like there's kalaloo that's really common in Angola, and we have a similar dish by the same name in Haitian culture called kalalu. And so that being able to see that or like learning different dishes have a different name or they go by a different name based off of where you are from on the African continent really makes for exciting research as a food writer for me, and then also being able to find new ways to tell those stories We've seen how popular it's become being able to preserve, archive, and tell our stories, whether that's through print, photography, film, podcasting, even. We have this sort of insatiable need to be able to own and tell the full narrative of our stories. And so I think going from like the food memories that I have to now really actively being able to share those stories and expand on those narratives is like really a dream come true, honestly, for me. So, yeah.
That's so nice to hear. And even in the same lane, the next question that we have for you is, if you have, is there a recipe that you feel that connects you the most deeply to your people?
Well, okay. There are so many. I would have to say soup jumu, which is this like pumpkin based or squash based soup made with a lot of root vegetables. And sometimes you can have it with meat or you can have it vegetarian style. And this is actually our independence soup. That's sort of another name that it goes by. And during colonial periods where slavery was still a practice on the island of Hispaniola in Haiti, uh, the enslaved were not allowed to actually consume this soup, this dish. Only the French or the colonized population were allowed to consume it. And so once um, Haitians were able to gain their independence from France on January 1st, 1804, that was the soup that became the national dish. And so anyone who's a part of the Haitian diaspora, whether you've been to Haiti or have never been to Haiti, but you have a familial connection, there's so much excitement around who's going to prepare the best pot of soup du mou. And so usually you have like a lot of the aunties in the family making a big pot and then sending, buckets of it to different family members in the city. At least that's sort of how I grew up. So my mom would make a pot, my aunts would make a pot, and then we'd go around sharing the dish. And sometimes you're like eating it for a week because it's just like so much food. But that for me really ties me very closely to my culture. And I love being able to like host dinners where I'm making this dish and sharing it with my local community of friends here in Lisbon.
And now that you've been in
We
Lisbon,
really liked when you
you giggle, Sarah.
How long?
Sarah, go ahead.
5 years now.
No, no, yeah, yeah. I was about to say that we really like when you were talking about decolonize food, at the same time when you were referring to Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and I remember that you wrote an article about that. What is the history behind? So my
Hmm.
next question is, what does it mean to decolonize food?
Ooh, how much time do we have? That's such a great question. I think for me, like the biggest question that I always ask myself when I'm preparing to write an article or a story is what's the question that I'm answering? And like, will people be curious enough about this topic to read about it? And I would say yes. Like, um, I've been writing for the last 10 years. I've been freelance the last 5 years now, and being able to figure out like, okay, if Piri Piri is like super popular in one part of the world and like no one really knows the history of it, there's so much that gets lost or that gets erased. And for me as a writer, it's so important to be able to archive that, like narrative, legacy. These are things that are really important to me outside of being a journalist. And so it's super important to tell the full story. I often say this a lot. And I think this is the reason why I take on the stories that I take on or write the articles that I do. Because oftentimes people may dismiss it or they feel like it doesn't matter or it was a long time ago. And it's like, no, it does matter. Because sometimes people may feel like, oh, well, maybe this person or this country colonized a former colony, and then the the history of the dish is completely erased and they just think maybe it's a Portuguese dish, but they don't realize like no, it actually probably started, in Brazil with where the spices where they came from, and then because of the slave trade, that impacted how people ate throughout. the global south. You know what I mean? So I think it's super important to be able to do proper research, but also present information that gets a conversation started. Um, and I think food, but also food writing, is a perfect way to do that. If you guys have seen High on the Hog, it was a Netflix docuseries that was based off of Dr. Jessica B. Harris's cookbook by the same name, High on the Hog. That book really goes into the deep research connecting West African cuisine to what the African American community now consumes today, in the United States. So being able to see her, and then I forget his name, I think it's Steven, her co-host, to like go to the markets and like see a lot of these root vegetables that he was familiar with growing up in the United States as a black man, and then like hearing it by a different name, but it's the same flavor profile. That is so important. And I think that helps us to see that we're more connected than we are dissimilar. Um, and I feel like food allows me to sort of break down those barriers and like allows people to feel more connected to their African roots or what have you.
That makes totally sense, especially when you shared the in the beginning the Kalulu from Santo Tomé and Príncipe e Kalulu that you also have in
And
Haiti.
Haiti.
Yeah, that already shows
Yeah,
that okay,
yeah.
it's like the same dish, maybe with different variations or small differences,
Spices, exactly.
but the essence of the dishes is the
Somehow
same.
they are related.
Yeah, and it makes sense
Yeah.
again, right?
And,
Because
you know,
people.
it speaks to the, Mhm.
No, no, you continue. Continue. This is you.
Yeah,
This is
it
not
speaks
us.
to the fact that like we were, our ancestors were able to preserve chunks of our culture, right? Through the interruption of colonization, because that was an interruption.
Yeah.
And, I think it's really telling, particularly having been raised in the United States, as Afro-Caribbean person, like it's just so it still blows my mind that like some of the recipes are still there, you know, like Thieboudienne, which is super popular in Senegal. It's a jollof-based rice with a lot of fish and what's it, palm oil, and sort of those same flavor profiles can be found in the Caribbean as well. We just may call it by a different name. Like gumbo is super huge. Using a lot of kiabu or okra is like for me one of the biggest telltale signs of like our connection to West Africa. I remember being a kid and my mom would make a big pot of not kalalu, but it was made with a lot of kiabu and like chunks of beef with the bone in. Did not like it as a kid, and like all of those dishes that I like did not like as a kid, I absolutely love as an adult. Being able to be in this part of the world and being able to go to like Rotavita in Alfama, which is a Mozambican restaurant, and having different dishes that literally remind me of my mom's cooking. Like you cannot deny the connection between, what our ancestors were eating to what, our more closer immediate ancestors consumed maybe 80 or 100 years ago. Like for me, that is so exciting as a food writer, being able to tell those stories and tying that back to history, to like why people super absolutely love piri piri chicken or how businesses like Nando's become famous. You know what I mean? Like it's just so important to be able to tell that full story that oftentimes like people just want to conveniently forget.
And do you have
So
do you face a lot of pushback when you are telling those stories?
people definitely ask me like, why are you writing? Do you write about anything else? Like I've literally had other journalists ask me like, do you not interview like other people like white Portuguese people? I was like, yeah, I do all the time, but those are not the stories that I tend to focus on. And I mean, I write about a variety of things, but I always find it really interesting that like other journalists will say like, oh, well, why are you writing about this? I'm like, no one's ever asked you like, why do you only write about people that look like you? You know what I mean? But I think it's maybe it makes people feel uncomfortable. I'm not really sure, but I know for me, like representation is super, super, super important, and to be able to like have my nieces or my nephews or just other younger people in my family feel like, oh, cool, I could pursue the arts, or this is a viable career. Like that is one of the ways I'm contributing to like legacy building and letting people know like it's super important to be able to archive and like own our own stories. Um, and I think journalism allows me to do that a lot quicker. So
Yeah, definitely.
That's
And
so beautiful, like to, yeah.
yes, and
Go
how
on, Leia.
I think you said, how can we avoid falling into colonized diets even when we're far from home?
that's such a great question. I would say definitely if one's able to like eat fresh or seasonally, that is one of the biggest ways you can actually follow a diet that is not so consumed by commercialism or like um, things that are just like not fresh. So, like, for example, in the United States, where I grew up in Boston, we had access to farmers just because we're in the Northeast, but it's way more costly, way more expensive to consume and to eat in a healthy manner. And so what I saw see my mom do when I was growing up is she would go to a lot of the like I don't know, markets where some of the restaurateurs would go, and that was still sort of affordable as opposed to going to like a very fancy specialty grocery store. As a kid, we'd have to wake up super early and bring like a trolley, get on the train because my mom didn't have a car then, and like most of the immigrant communities would go to this markets, like outdoor markets called Haymarket, and I hated it as a kid. I was just like, why am I spending my Saturday doing this? And literally, it's like you could see people from Vietnam, from Thailand, from Dominican Republic, from Haiti, like all of the sort of immigrant populations in Boston would be there, as would the restaurateurs, because you could get some of the freshest stuff super cheap. The place still exists, and like now that sort of is a nostalgic memory for me. Um, but that's the way my mom and her mom grew up. You'd go Saturday morning to the market with your things and you get your shopping done, and then you come home to cook a fresh meal. And so that for me is like another way that you could still connect to your culture or still connect to a way that's not tied to colonial way of consuming. Um, like I know our sort of modern society relies heavily on like Uber Eats or these sort of apps that remove you from having to like be in community with your neighbors or whatever, which is probably why people are so insanely lonely right now. But it's important to be able to participate in your community this way, right? Maybe learning what's in season or learning like, oh, this particular fruit or vegetable is best eaten, early September as opposed to late October. And it's also healthier for our body, for our gut biome. And I think our sort of our current society is concerned about like longevity and like having a work life balance and being healthier and being outside and having less screen time. A lot of that is tied to our diet as well. So like if we can eat in a seasonal manner, the better, because that's literally what our ancestors were doing. And all of those traditions and those dishes and those vegetables and things are considered now superfoods. They're considered high in collagen, like nutrient dense. All of the things that, maybe we might take for granted or just like, oh my God, I can't eat this another day or whatever. It's actually so good for you. Like one way I found, unfortunately, that the United States, or just agribusiness, the agribusiness in general, like they'll co-opt something from any culture, right? Like now people are really into collagen boosters or whatever. And so they're selling bone broth. I don't know how many TikToks I've seen where people are like, this is how you make bone broth, and it's really good for like having plump skin. And I remember my mom would make this like a big soup, almost like a kashupa, but with more broth and
Yes.
with a lot of beef because with the bone in, because that produces a lot of collagen. That's really good for your skin. It's good for your bone. It's good for your gut biome. Like we would have this every Sunday, So for me, I'm like, oh my goodness, like we're so right. Just the traditions and all of these things. It's really interesting to see how I guess modern society will co-opt these traditions based off of the research that has been produced to see like, oh, fonio is a superfood, breadfruit is a superfood, moringa is a superfood, like mango, avocado, etc. So for me, it's very affirming to know that like these culinary traditions, although maybe have been looked down in a colonial context, are things that really kept our ancestors healthy and strong for a very long time.
That's so cool because this leads me to the next question, which is like, what would you say to someone who wants to reconnect with their ancestral food heritage?
That's like awesome. I always congratulate people that are really interested in doing that. Um, first it starts with doing research and also like talking to your family members, talking to your elders to understand like, hey, what are some of the recipes that your mom or dad taught you or your grandmother taught you? And writing those down or recording, that elder in the family making the dish. It's just super important to be able to do that because oftentimes we may again take it for granted, right? And that's something that I've started doing. Like whenever I do go back home, I'll spend time with my aunt or with my older siblings and say like, "Hey, how did you learn how to make this?" Or, "Do you mind if I record you?" And having dinners with my extended family members who I may not get a chance to see because I live so far away. So being able to take the initiative and like spending time with maybe an older person in the family, or getting on the phone, setting up a Zoom call or on WhatsApp and like talking to them because that's another way of like archiving our history. And it also made me think of what uh, the gentleman, I think it's Lonnie Rich or something like this. He's like the head of the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. And he did a call for like just people in the United States to send family recipes or things like that. And those ended up becoming artifacts within the museum. So, like, you know, you just never know sort of how that could impact um, history in general. So, let's say start there.
That's a great start. And when you are writing about this, do you also share some tips regarding on how to do it? On your work, we can find it.
So typically, unless it's like maybe a personal essay um, about like cooking with my mom or learning how to prepare a particular dish, I tend to stick to telling the interviewee story or the chef's story or the winemaker story. Unless it's a lifestyle piece, then I sort of have a little bit more leeway to have a bit more input on like or criticism or an opinion on a particular topic. Um, but for the most part, not so much. Not so much. Yeah. Can you repeat the question for me one more time?
I can. Basically, I was saying that eating well is a right to our bodies, and looking, of course, to the past, the things that we face as
Hmm.
Black people in general, we always weren't grant that right. We always were able to eat well. So my question is to try to understand from your perspective and from your side if this is something that you think about when you are doing your work, then when you are writing, do you think about that, about
Hmm.
this fact that we
Mm,
always been able to have access to the
mhm.
best ingredients or the best food because
Yeah.
of the things that we faced as Black people?
Mm, that's a great question. Um, yeah, I would say, like typically when I prepare to write a story or um, an editor says, "Hey, we really want to talk about," for example, last November during the presidential campaigning and everything, um, there was a really harmful statement made by now the current president of the United States targeting Haitian immigrants who are living in the state of Ohio. Um, and it was a rumor that then literally spread all over the internet to the point where, I had two American people who I do not know message me and ask me if it's true that, like, you know, these migrants were eating people's cats and pets. Like, that's crazy. And so my editor at Cuisine Noir, she had asked if I wanted to write an article about Haitian food culture in the month of November of last year. And I was like super honored. I said, absolutely. And I had a few chefs in mind that I wanted to feature in the article. And so we wrote the article. I wrote the article not in response to those crazy claims, but that was always really in the back of my mind. And I wanted to have chefs and thought leaders in the food space who one have their own restaurants, have been on like some of the most high profile cooking competitions on TV, to share their expertise, to share like really what Haitian food culture means to them. And so that's one of the articles that I'm really proud of. And so oftentimes when I do get an assignment or commission to write a story, I want to think about like, if this person, one, has never met a person from the Haitian diaspora or has never been to Haiti, I want the article or the story to do enough justice for them to understand, like, oh, wow, okay, this is what happened, in Haiti's past, or they gained their independence in 1804, and like, this is sort of the way the media, the Western media, portrays Haiti. So those are the sort of elements that I included in the article because oftentimes people just literally don't know anything about Haiti or they only know negative aspects of it, right? And so every story that I am commissioned to write, I keep that in mind. Like, okay, what are some of the biases that people already have about this particular cuisine? Like, the story is always like, oh my goodness, people don't really um, value African diasporic food, or they feel like it doesn't look pretty on the plate or whatever. So these are the things that I already have in the back of my mind when I'm thinking of how do I want to frame this story outside of telling maybe the chef or the restaurateur's story overall. So the goal is to always educate and then get people curious about like, oh wow, I didn't know this about Haiti or Angola or Cape Verde, um, to get a conversation going. So to answer your question.
Yes, definitely.
I
Yes.
think this is so interesting. Yeah,
Cool.
I think this is so interesting to make people more conscious and educate them somehow and make them be curious about the history. Because,
Yeah.
as you said, that I feel this too, that people are not very curious about African diaspora food. And
Hmm.
nowadays, since we have social media, we have internet, is everything much more easier in with one click we can
Yeah.
change literally their minds, their perspective,
Literally.
and also allow them to be more conscious about what is going on because we still exist
Hmm.
and this history and the food is alive with us, is alive with
Yeah.
internet and with the
Absolutely.
travels and everything
Absolutely.
that people they share.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's sometimes the internet is a good place.
It's a pool and we can find everything inside the pool. Yeah.
Precisely.
So
Yeah.
yeah. My next question is: As a Black American Haitian woman living in Portugal, how do you experience that relationship with food? You already mentioned
Mm.
like here and there
Yeah, of
from
course.
the African countries that they speak Portuguese, but
How am I experiencing the city through food? Is that the question?
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you are
Um,
curious about the dishes,
yeah,
how have been so far your experience?
definitely. I always joke, but very serious. Like it's very hard to have a bad meal in Lisbon. Like it's or in Portugal. It just is. Only because of where I've come from. Like the produce is fresher. There just are more laws on um, what you can and can't put in food. Like we don't really have strong laws around like food safety per se. You know, there's a lot of things that are just not allowed to be imported from the United States into the European Union for obvious reasons. And so I'd say like that has made me fall in love with like cooking again, was just having access to fresh produce, and then also too just the diversity that I've just been around in Lisbon, particularly um, with the Lusophone world. Like I'd never had food from Guinea-Bissau. I mean, I had a lot of food from Cape Verde because it's a large Cape Verdean community in Boston. But being able to discover food, not discover, but to enjoy food from like Angola or from Brazil, from Macau, even like that has been really, really exciting. And being able to interview these chefs, tell their stories, support their mission in some way through my writing, like it's been really great. I have no complaints on that regard. Yeah.
Really tasty, I assume. I'm so envious right
Oh
now.
my gosh,
Just thinking about
truly.
the food.
Next time you're in Lisbon, let me know.
Yes, and what type of revolutions do you think that happen on the plate now, just to make us more,
Wow.
our mouths more?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I would say there was this one time where I was asked. Well, I feel like I'm always asked this question about like who owns a dish, like which country or whatever um, can say they own a dish, and the journalist had asked me. I think this was at Imminent Festival, maybe like a couple years ago, and they had invited me to speak on a panel about like the politics of food, and I was like, okay, this is a really good topic. And this one journalist had asked, like, okay, if there is someone who opens a restaurant and it's like a Mexican restaurant or something like this, or a Cape Verdean restaurant, they're not of that culture. Is that cultural appropriation? And I was like, that's a valid question, And I think for me, it's super important to understand like the person's end goal or purpose. Are they creating this business just as a money grab? Like, okay, I know I'm going to make a lot of money and I don't really care about the culture. Like, I think that is inappropriate. But if there is some sort of education where they're explaining the dishes, they're explaining, like, what was the inspiration behind starting the business, then I feel like you're not necessarily in those murky waters of like cultural appropriation. Um, but yeah, I think it could sort of rub people the wrong way if, for example, like somebody opens, I don't know, a southern restaurant and they've never been to the United States, they've never been to a southern American city in the United States or whatever, or they didn't grow up in that culture, and there's no, I don't know, no intention of like really understanding or respecting like the traditions of Southern American cuisine. I think this is sort of where people go wrong with it. Um, but yeah, I think it's super important to be able to recognize like, okay, where spices come from, where are these dishes, how these dishes have been inspired or impacted by the past. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with like what's the person's intention at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That makes
And if
sense.
yeah, In order to find your work, for those that are watching us and want to follow what you write and learn more with you, how can they do that?
Yes, of course. All my work is found on my Instagram page, which is at Margo's Creative Life. Um, all in my link tree. Is there.
Perfect. Any All the links for all the projects are there, right?
Yes, I know. I'm a busy woman. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with us. Sarah, I give you also the word. I don't know if you want to
Thank
share
you.
anything else.
No, I'm just very impressed with your work. You know, I'm one of your biggest fans. I always
I
hear
know
cheers
you're
for
the
every
best. You guys are the
video.
best. Thank you.
I really, yeah, we are very happy to finally share with our community your work because we believe that we need to share it and they need to know what do you do, which is amazing. It's mind
Thank
blowing.
you. I'm like super honored. You have no idea. I was like, okay, let me put on my best fit. But no, I'm super honored and just very happy with all of the amazing interviews that you guys have been able to produce and the community that you've both built with mukiidi. So thank you.
I
Thank you,
thank you,
Margot.
Margot. Thank you.